Welcome to Crime Era channel, where every crime tells a story. The darkest secrets of crime are uncovered, and the hidden truths of criminal underworlds come to light. In 1981, a convoy of trucks rolled quietly into the high desert of Wasco County, Oregon. They carried dreams, disciples, and a vision unlike anything rural America had ever seen. At the center of it all was a man known as Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh, a mystic from India whose words had drawn seekers from across the globe. To his followers, he was enlightenment incarnate. To others, he was something far more complicated. In this barren stretch of red dust and open sky, they built a city from nothing, Rajneeshpuram. They promised peace, meditation, and spiritual freedom. But in the quiet corners of that dream, power began to hum, and power, as history has shown, has its own gravity. Rajneesh spoke of awakening beyond the ego, of shedding the illusions of society. His followers, dressed in shades of orange and red, called themselves sannyas and spiritual revolutionaries. They saw Oregon as holy ground, a place to prove that spiritual living could coexist with modern life. They bought 64,000 acres and began building temples, homes, and even airstrips. At first, it was astonishing. A utopia rising from dust. But soon, the neighbors grew uneasy. The commune's size, secrecy, and sudden political influence began to feel less like faith and more like control. While Rajneesh retreated into a period of public silence, communicating only through gestures, one voice grew louder: Anand Sheela. She was the movement's firebrand, its manager, its protector. To outsiders, she was confident and ruthless. To insiders, she was the executor of Bhagwan's will. Sheela handled everything: the money, the press, the politics. And as the commune expanded, her words carried more authority than his. Rajneesh spoke of inner peace, Sheela enforced outer power. That contrast, mystic calm and administrative ferocity, would soon ignite the kind of tension that tears movements apart. The surrounding towns, quiet, conservative, rooted in routine, didn't know what to make of thousands of red-clad newcomers chanting, meditating, and voting as a single block. Rumors spread faster than facts. The locals feared a takeover, the commune feared persecution. What began as a spiritual experiment now pulsed with paranoia on both sides. The conflict moved from suspicion to legislation. Wasco County tried to contain Rajneeshpuram through zoning laws. The commune responded by organizing politically, and that was when the spiritual city became a political force. By 1984, Rajneeshpuram's leadership faced a harsh truth: they could not expand without political control. To stay in power, they needed votes, and to win votes, they needed numbers. Sheela and her inner circle devised plans that blurred legality, ethics, and morality. They bussed in homeless people from across America, registering them as residents not for charity, but for their ballots. When that failed, desperation turned darker. The fear of losing control had replaced any semblance of peace. In the late summer of 1984, a chilling idea emerged among the leadership. If they couldn't win the upcoming election, they could prevent others from voting. A small group began experimenting with a bacteria, Salmonella typhimurium. Their aim was not mass destruction but disruption, to incapacitate the town's residents just long enough to swing the election in their favor. The plot was executed quietly, a calculated act of sabotage against local restaurants and salad bars. The result: over 700 people fell ill. Oregon had just witnessed the first, and largest, bioterror incident on U.S. soil. At first, authorities didn't connect the dots. The outbreak seemed like an unfortunate coincidence. But inside Rajneeshpuram, whispers began. Some disciples grew uneasy. Others denied everything. Rajneesh himself later claimed total ignorance, insisting his teachings had been twisted. Yet the damage was done. Public trust was gone. What had begun as a dream of enlightenment was now synonymous with fear. As federal investigations closed in, Sheela and several of her close aides fled the commune. Rajneesh broke his years of silence not to teach meditation, but to condemn her. He accused her of betrayal, corruption, and a list of heinous crimes. The dream city began to collapse in on itself. The followers, once so united, fractured between loyalty and disbelief. The desert, which had once hummed with chants, now echoed with confusion and accusation. In 1985, federal agents arrested Rajneesh on charges of immigration fraud. He denied any involvement in the poisoning plot or the political schemes, portraying himself as a victim of Sheela's ruthless ambition. The U.S. government deported him shortly after, and Rajneeshpuram was abandoned, a ghost city in the Oregon desert, silent under the weight of its own contradictions. Where there was once laughter, only wind. Where there was belief, only questions. Time softens outrage, but it does not erase memory. Today, Rajneeshpuram stands as a cautionary tale about how charisma can eclipse conscience, and how idealism, without accountability, can breed extremism. To some, Rajneesh was a misunderstood teacher. To others, he was a manipulator who cloaked control in the language of spirituality. The truth, as always, likely lies somewhere in between, in that fragile space where belief and power collide. After his deportation, Rajneesh drifted, seeking a country that would receive him. But each border brought rejection. The once celebrated guru was now in exile. Yet, to his faithful, this persecution was merely proof of his purity. It wasn't a fall, but a test. Meanwhile, Anand Sheela faced her own reckoning. Arrested in Germany and extradited to the US, she was charged for her role in the poisoning and wiretapping conspiracies. She claimed she acted only to protect the commune. Her conviction was swift. Rajneesh eventually returned to India, rebranding himself as Osho. He distanced his new movement from the chaos of Oregon, and his discourses resumed, softer and more introspective. But for those who remembered the desert city, a question lingered: could enlightenment ever truly survive the shadow of ambition? Psychologists later studied Rajneeshpuram as a blueprint of control, showing how obedience can disguise itself as devotion. When dependence becomes identity, the mind stops asking questions. Every cult, they said, begins with the promise of awakening, and every downfall begins when one person claims to own the light. Years later, former followers began to speak. Some expressed gratitude, finding moments of genuine peace despite everything. Others spoke of betrayal, of how their idealism was used as currency for power. Decades on, the documentary Wild Wild Country reignited public fascination with the story. For a new generation, it was a lesson in vigilance. For the old, a reminder of wounds not yet closed. The story of Rajneeshpuram did not end with its collapse, it evolved. It became a reflection of how humanity repeats its cycles: enlightenment, control, collapse, and rebirth. Rajneeshpuram began as an idea that peace could be built if only enough people believe. But belief, when bound by ego, becomes its own prison. The commune fell and the leaders scattered, but the questions remain. How does faith turn to fanaticism? When does leadership become control? The red dust settles over what was once a city of dreams, and in that silence, perhaps, lies the truest enlightenment, the understanding that no teacher, no ideology, no paradise built on obedience can ever deliver the freedom that only comes from within. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most fascinating chapters.